you guys have either already started or are about to start learning about plants in your classroom. So what we're going to do is make our own planters so that whenever you do learn about plants and the plant life cycle, you'll be able to plant your seed inside your own ceramic planter. So you're first going to roll your clay into a ball. It doesn't have to be perfect because you're just going to kind of flatten it out later anyway. So it's kind of rough around the edges, not a big deal at this point. What you're going to do once you have your clay that's shaped inside in a ball, you're going to put your thumb about halfway. I'm going to poke a hole with my thumb halfway through. I'm going to stop about here. So pushing in. Once I get about halfway through, I'm going to start pinching and turning to build up those clay walls. You see how the hole keeps getting bigger? So keep pinching and turning. Okay, and then once you get to this point, this is the part where you can start smoothing it out really good. You'll have some slip on your table right here, and I'm just gonna dip my finger in it to get it wet. It's just clay mixed with water. And I'm gonna smooth out anything that looks cracked. Make sure you're not putting too much water on your clay. Otherwise, if it gets too wet, it's going to be really hard to form into whatever you'd like it to be. If you want to make sure that it's sitting flat, just tap the bottom of it so that it has a flat edge to it, so now it can sit by itself. If you want the edges at the top to be flat as well, just flip it over and do a few taps on the top so that it's nice and flat. So take your time smoothing it out. For the walls, the side walls of your pinch pot, make sure it is not any thinner than the thickness of your pinky. So I'm holding my pinky up to the thickness of the wall. Mine looks good. If yours is any thinner, it could possibly break, especially once it's dried. It can be really, really fragile before I put it into the kiln. So make sure your walls are not too thin. There are a few things you can do once you get to this point. You can add texture on the outside. You have a few different options. You can just draw. You can just draw your designs on. If you want to, with a little toothpick thing like this, and make some lines, like some texture lines like that. Or I'm gonna go ahead and take that off, because I also have texture plates that you guys can use to push into the clay, and it will create texture on the side. So for example, here is a texture plate. You need to make sure you're using the right side. I'm gonna use the side that's pushing the plastic, where it's pushing out this way. That's where I want to push in the walls of my clay. So I'm just gonna start right here. I'm using my thumb to press my clay into that texture, and I'm kind of wrapping that texture around. Make sure you're pressing not too hard, but just hard enough to where that texture is being pushed into the walls of your clay, so that when I take it off, it's got a really cool texture around the edge. Okay, so you'd probably have to do that 2 different times. Just gonna start where I left off. It might take you more than one try to get the texture in, and that's okay. If you can't get it for some reason, you are probably just not pressing hard enough, but please be gentle. Obviously, it's gonna lose a little bit of its shape because you're moving it around and pressing it, but once you're done, you can kind of just form it back into a circle, and then I have that texture on the side. Okay, we're obviously not going to paint these today because it has to sit out and dry for about a week or so, and then it goes inside the kiln. So once it comes outside, once it comes out of the kiln, that's when we'll be able to glaze these. 2 more steps is, the first one, make sure your name, or sorry, your initials or your name are carved into the bottom. So I'm using this little tip, and my initials are AC. So I'm carving that gently into the bottom. And then you're gonna get a straw, and because we wanna make sure, if you are putting water, like let's say there's a plant in here and you're watering that plant, at this point, there's nowhere for the water to go. It has to be able to drain, otherwise your plant's gonna have too much water. So you're gonna take your straw, and make sure you're sharing the straw, and I'm just gonna poke a hole right in the center, and that's gonna be the drainage hole. I'm gonna pull it back out so that I have a nice hole for the water to drain, okay? And I kind of poked a hole right through my initials, so maybe write them on the side, and then you can just squeeze that clay out, and the next person's ready to use the straw.